So distractors are quite an important aspect of the listening test, and they might lead to your success and your failure. Hello test takers, welcome to another episode on the IELTS multi-step program. As usual, my name is Lanre and I'll be your anchor throughout the duration of this particular episode. Over the last 4 months, most of the test takers that I've interacted with have always mentioned one particular aspect of the IELTS as their, what would I call it, their Achilles heel. That's their weakness and their weak spot. And it has always been listening. I laugh when I see Nigerians talk about how hard the listening aspect of the IELTS is. Their complaints range from pronunciation, the accents, how fast the listening tapes are, and the fact that there are a lot of distractions. So today's focus would be on the distractors and distractions that you would face in the listening test of the IELTS. And how do you surmount those challenges? How do you overcome them? That is going to be the focus of this video. So sit back, relax, and come along on the ride. Today, it's going to be an explosive session where we're going to reveal the secrets that have held you back from getting that desired band score and probably migrating to that country of your dreams. What are distractors? And what are the most common distractions that you would find in the IELTS? An example is this. You're listening to a recording between a test taker, between a student and a professor. And here, the student is asking the professor when an assignment or when a project is due. So the student says, "Hello, Professor Lanre, when should we submit the assignment?" And Professor Lanre says, "I've given you the assignment since last month, so I think that you've had ample time to finish everything that you need to do. So I presume that you should be submitting on Monday." And then the student says, "Oh, Monday? Sorry, do you mean Sunday?" And then the professor says, "No, I meant Monday as in the first day of the work week." Full stop. Now, if you listen to that conversation, you would have heard 3 days mentioned. Basically just 2 days, but they were mentioned 3 times. You heard Monday, you heard Sunday, and then you heard Monday again. It's quite easy to be distracted and to miss out on the real answer because remember, it's a listening test. You're under so much pressure and your mind is trying to capture everything you're listening to. At the same time, you're trying to read the questions and also write your answers. So distractors are quite an important aspect of the listening test, and they might lead to your success and your failure. So, what are the most common distractors that occur in the IELTS listening test? That's where we're going to start from. If you look on the screen right now, you would have these distractors rolling on your screen, so you can actually pause this video if you want to take a second look at them. In the IELTS, a distractor could be any of the following. 1. A suggestion by someone that isn't taken. 2. A mistake by someone that they or someone else then corrects. 3. The opposite to what the question asks. And 4. A particular word in the question or in a multiple choice answer that is used in the recording as part of an incorrect answer. All of these 4 things could be the distractor in your listening test. And information that comes under all of these 4 things could actually disturb you and hamper or hinder you from getting the correct answer or extracting the relevant information from the recording that you will be listening to. Before I go further, I will tell you one thing that distractions are not. Rather, I would correct a misconception, a key misconception that a lot of test takers have about distractions in the IELTS. And what is this? Here is the key misconception. Distractors are most often seen in dialogues. That is a fallacy. And I'll explain. The IELTS listening test is broadly divided into 2 areas. There are 4 parts of the IELTS listening test: part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. All these 4 areas are broadly divided into 2 subdivisions: conversations and monologues. A synonym for conversations would be what? Dialogues. And then you have monologues. Your section 1 and your section 3 are dialogues or conversations, while your section 2 and section 4 are monologues. The misconception that I said earlier, which you see rolling on the screen, is that distractions or distractors only occur in dialogues. Hey, that's a lie. There could be distractors even in the monologue aspects of the listening test in the IELTS. And you would do well to follow through with this video so you can notice and then you can learn where these distractions occur and how to guard against them. Moving on. For distractors that occur in the dialogue part, whether they are descriptions, what people or most people say is this. They say that distractors are most often seen in dialogues, where a speaker says something and is then corrected by the other speaker. That means you hear the same piece of information in two versions. One is correct and one is incorrect. And if you're not listening carefully, it's easy to write down the wrong one. This is the most common definition or description of distractors in the IELTS. In fact, I can guarantee that if you visit 10 blogs today or 10 websites where you can get information on how to do well in the IELTS, 8 of them would define distractors the way I've just defined it right now. But remember, this is a fallacy, as distractors extend beyond just dialogues. The example I gave at the beginning of this video was an example of a distractor that occurred in a dialogue. But is that the only way that distractors can come up? No, it's not. So, what are the 4 most common distractors that account for 85% of the failure in the listening test that I have noticed? And I use that word with every sense of certainty. I have noticed. As a tutor who has been lecturing the IELTS for quite a while now, I have under my belt at least 1,000 students trained, prepared for the IELTS. And of 1,000, I have recorded more than 60% success rate where students got above a 7.5 in the IELTS. So I am talking with all sense of authority when I say that these 4 areas constitute the most significant aspect where students get it wrong in the IELTS listening test. So let's go right into it. Number 1, the most common and the most repeated distractor for non-native users of the English language. Please notice my focus is on non-native users of the English language. Obviously, anyone writing the IELTS will definitely be a non-native, but I am much more particular about non-native users from Africa and from Asia. A lot of us have a problem with the way the native speakers pronounce their words, which automatically will lead to the number 1 distractor that we have: similar sounding words. This has been the bane of many people in the listening test. Immediately I said similar sounding words, someone here in the studio went, "Oh my God, it's so easy to mix those up." What are similar sounding words? If you go back to your secondary school English language lessons, you're called homophones. Homophones are words that sound alike, but they have different meanings. But it doesn't just stop there. So the similar sounding words that you might be confused about in the IELTS that fall under homophones are words like dear and dear. What do I mean? D-E-A-R, deer. D-E-E-R, deer, the animal. Now, if someone who is a native speaker goes ahead and mentions both words in a sentence, it'll be quite difficult for you to pick out which one you're referring to if you do not understand the context. The context of the conversation, the context of the speech the person is making would give you an idea of if that person is talking about animals or if the person is talking about that feeling of being very close to someone, which is a dear friend. That's the first one. Another example of similar sounding words that could be problematic in the IELTS are words that have to denote nationality. For example, a common example are the 2 countries, Austria and Australia. it's quite easy to mix those up in connected speech, in a rapid stretch of utterances. Remember, now most people, when they hear these tips, they laugh and they say, oh no, Mr. Lanre, it's impossible for me to confuse Austria with Australia. They do not really sound alike. But I tell you that on the day of the test, when you're sitting on that chair and you have the question paper in front of you, you have your headphones plugged to your ear, what is going through your mind then is the accumulated tension of writing an examination or writing a test. So your mind isn't really that settled to quickly pick out Austria from Australia. What usually happens there is you hear everything and everything is conflated together, and it's quite easy for you to make the mistake. Another example would be words like, oh, so for example, if you hear a conversation where someone is asked about their nationality, and then it goes, oh, where are you from? It says, oh, I'm from a country in Europe that starts with an S. Oh, that would be Switzerland or Sweden. So what are you? Are you Swiss? Oh, no, I'm Swede. If you don't listen carefully, that's quite easy to mix up. Swiss, Swede. Now, if you're not even conversant with those two words, how do you even get them down? So, similar sounding words could be a major source of distraction for you in the IELTS. And to illustrate that, here is a sample question from the IELTS that you would see on your screen. And you would hear two speakers who are talking, and you would hear a word that sounds very similar to something else that you know that would be imputed into that conversation. It goes thus. The question says, the man ordered dash t-shirts. The man ordered dash t-shirts. And here's the dialogue. Man: hi, I'm calling to confirm a delivery of 30 t-shirts to my apartment in Waterloo. Woman: I see. Let me have a look. Oh, we only have one order for Waterloo, sir, and it's for 13 shirts, not 30. Man: ah, yes. Did I say 30? Sorry, I meant 13. It is 13 shirts. Now, if you listen to that dialogue carefully, the words 30 and 13 are used. They sound quite similar if you're not really conversant with the ending sounds of those two words. We have 30 and we have 13. Now, it's easy for me to enunciate that difference between those two words because I'm a non-native speaker and that's the way we speak, really. But for a native user of the language, it might be quite difficult for you to even detect that difference between 30 and 13. So both words will sound quite similar and sound alike, and it's easy for you to guess wrong and write down the wrong option. The second distractor, major distractor that a lot of people have problems with in the IELTS is this: previously mentioned words. I'll take that again. Previously mentioned words. These are words that have been uttered, that have been mentioned in a particular speech or in a particular dialogue. And because they've been mentioned before, they register in our minds, they stick in our brains. And when the list of options come, if it's a multiple choice question, usually you have these words also in that list. So it's easy to confuse, and it's easy to be confused, and it's easy to be distracted, thinking, oh, I heard that word earlier and it's in the options, definitely it's the answer. Remember, just because you hear a word and it's in the options doesn't make it the right answer. Obviously, the aim of the IELTS listening test is to assess your communicative competence through the listening medium, which is to detect your ability to extract relevant information from what you're listening to. So, it's not supposed to be easy. Obviously, the task is for you to stress yourself, to move, to task your brain to be able to pick out relevant information. And if you think that every word you've heard and you see in the options or you see in the list of questions would definitely be an answer, you are going about it the wrong way. Correct that notion now. In fact, as they say here in Nigeria, perish the thought. Moving on. Before I move on, actually, I'd like to stress something. Previously mentioned words account for over 85% of the failure in the listening test in the IELTS. It is probably the main culprit. In fact, if I were to go further, I would say this would be the chief of the village people in the listening test that would delay you or deny you that particular score that you need in the IELTS to leave this country or to leave whatever country where you're currently in right now. So, pray against it, fast against it, and more importantly, practice, as there's no other substitute for practicing. Tip 3. The third important distractor that most people face in the IELTS that usually causes a lot of challenges for them is synonyms. Now, don't get me wrong. Your knowledge of synonyms is probably the single most important decider of your success or failure in the IELTS. But it could also be your stumbling block in the listening test. How do I mean? Now, your answer choices or the options can be changed, can be switched. The two ways that synonyms can be problematic in the IELTS are as follows. 1. Answer choices could be replaced with synonyms. So the word that you heard in the recording would not be what you see in your answer choices. That's the first one. The second way that you could have a problem with synonyms is that the question itself is rephrased or paraphrased. So what you hear in the recording and what you see in the question is totally different. For most people, what they do in the listening test is when they read the questions, they pick out keywords in the question and then they go to the recording and they listen out for those keywords. They scan the recording for those keywords. But what happens when you read a question where there's no direct or obvious keyword that you can scan for in the recording? Then that is a huge problem. I'll stop here before I go to the fourth distractor, which is also a quite major one. But before I go ahead, I'd like to advise you, subscribe to our channel, watch our videos. Please reach out to us by sending us a comment, by dropping a comment in the comment section, sending us a message through any of our social media handles that are scrolling on the screen. Would like to hear from you. What are the major challenges that you have with the IELTS? How can we help you? And how can we help you achieve that dream of a desirable band score in the IELTS?